All right, it sounds like, yeah, this battle is far from over, especially when you listen to the information regulator saying that there is no appeal against its enforcement order. It stands, and it stands ready to also speak, you know, to its stakeholders about this issue. But also remember that Judge Tolme earlier on saying that the parties must determine what's in the best interest of the learners, and they need to then work together when it comes to this one, because today's court ruling was about the issue of urgency. It's not about what exactly needs to happen going forward. And that particular issue of what's to happen going forward is still a matter of serious and fierce debate, because you think about the fact that various organizations have different takes on what should happen when it comes to the publication of the matric results. You have some of the learners that we're in conversation with yesterday, for example, saying that they don't want everybody to know the results that they would have gotten. Others are saying they don't have a problem because this is an issue of transparency. So the Minister of Basic Education, Siviwe, I understand, is now joining us this evening. Minister, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. So let's just start here. Firstly, you've welcomed the ruling on the matter of urgency. Let's start there.
Yes, thank you, Bongiwe, and good evening to your viewers. We have welcomed the decision of the High Court. Of course, we are welcoming the matter and the decision because we had an urgent interdict against the DBE in terms of releasing the results, which we are intending on releasing on Tuesday. And so we are welcoming the legal clarity that the court has given us, but also we are welcoming the fact that we now are aware that what the conversations with the information regulator has been is now we're going to be able to have at least a year to be able to fix what the information regulator has raised with us. We remain open to conversating with the information regulator. Advocate Tlakula had said in the clip just before that I'd convened an urgent meeting with them during the December break, and I had essentially committed that we will, as DBE, make sure that we really meet the requirements that the information regulator has in terms of protecting personal information. However, we did plead with them to say we are unable to change the setup of how things have been done right now, considering the fact that we are merely days away from the releasing of the results. And so we remain committed to working with them, and we will make sure that our systems align with what it is that they want us to do.
So how do you contend with what she says as well, that there is no appeal that is currently sitting before them, and therefore the enforcement stands, and she understands that that's to go ahead? So how then do you begin as the department to contend with this?
So, Bongiwe, these are two separate matters. The one is obviously the issue around the penalty that the information regulator is speaking about, and the issue there was the submission of papers that was done by the sheriff after the 30-day deadline. However, the information regulator went to and approached the High Court in order to say that they would like to interdict us from issuing the results. So that is a separate matter from the issue around the penalty. So the issue of the penalty we will deal with, because of course if the sheriff has on our side let the process down, then we have to abide by whatever the penalty is. And we will be in conversation with the information regulator, because there was an issue around the public holidays during the December holidays, and that's why there was an issue around the date. But that's a separate matter. But I want to assure South Africans that, number one, we will be issuing the results in the national newspapers on Tuesday at 6 a.m., but also to assure our learners and our parents and communities alike that no names or ID numbers will be published, and that the practice that has been followed thus far of issuing a unique exam number is what will be followed even in this year.
So yesterday, Minister, right on that point, I was in conversation with some matriculants here on the show, and two of them actually said they're not comfortable even with this because, you know, there is a sense of community, which is an issue that they're raising, that there's a sense of community. For example, you find that a newspaper is not just seen by a learner with their family, but then you know, it'll be everybody around them. And they say that you may find that maybe your student number, you know, exam number does not appear in the paper. How do you begin then to feel when all the others are celebrating around you? And they say that for them that works on their psyche. How do you begin then to answer some of the concerns they're raising around that?
I think, Bongi, and that's why I would never be dismissive of the case of the information regulator, because their case speaks directly to that exactly, which is the protection of personal information. Because while there may be learners who may want their unique exam numbers published, and some people may argue that other people won't know your unique exam number, it's not your ID number, but at the end of the day, it is personal information, and that's why I would never dismiss what the information regulator seeks to do, which is to say government processes need to get to a place where they are protecting personal information, even in their way of working, even in their processes. And so what we've said to them and what I've committed personally to them is to say, we have to be able to publish this year because of the tight timeline that we are facing. However, we will make sure that for 2025, we will be able to allow learners to be able to choose whether or not they allow us to publicize their unique exam numbers in the press. The reason why this is important, some people have asked both, why is this even still important? It is such an outdated tradition of having exam numbers published in a newspaper. The reason being that if you look at the court ruling that we are relying on as DBE from a couple of years ago, the court ruling also supports this notion that there isn't only one way for all learners to access the information in real time. Some learners are able to go to the school to access their information. Some learners are able to get it from a newspaper. Some learners have already moved by the time the results are released. So we've got to be able to cater for all these different learners. And that's why we're saying we have processes in place that we will follow for 2025 to meet what the information regulator is saying. However, we are pleased that the courts did not deem the court case urgent enough to interdict us from proceeding with publishing next week.
So before I let you go, there's another issue. I remember outside Parliament, you said that the constituents of Cocomelon are yours, and the parents are complaining bitterly about the stationery lists that are now also including detergents. It's just, some of the parents are saying it's unheard of, but also at the same time, the uniform, you know, costs are also still quite steep for a number of parents, and there's a lot going on there. And some of the parents are saying, please intervene.
Yeah. Yes. No, I have seen some of the petitions online, Bongiwe. But on a very serious note, this afternoon I actually met with the trade unions, SGBs, and other professional bodies in the sector. And this came up quite sharply, where people were saying, look, I mean, we know that things are tough in schools. And I think it's important to perhaps indicate that, of course, things like stationery and requirements for schools, they are determined at a school level. And so we are unable to set kind of a policy that says this can't happen or whatever the case may be. But I think what this speaks to, Bongiwe, is the dire financial strains that the sector finds itself in. Because, of course, now schools are having to rely more on parents to be able to supplement some of the things that they were able to do themselves because of the current financial situation that we find ourselves in. And so this is why when I make the case to say to not just Treasury, but to say to the entire government that we've got to look at how we are funding education in South Africa, because parents are struggling with stationery, parents are struggling with some of these supplies that are needed by schools, but parents are also struggling with uniforms. But it's because of the economic situation in our country that we find ourselves in this environment. But I must say, when it comes to uniform, we have made strides to make sure that uniform is standardized as much as possible to bring down the cost.
And I suppose it's also because, you know, the parents aren't simply complaining not to do their part, but they themselves are struggling with the rising cost of living. Some have not even had increases in years, and they now have to supplement a system that is also putting them under strain when they themselves simply aren't coping with, you know, their basic needs.
And that's the nub of it, Bongiwa, that when we talk about the reason why the economy needs to grow, it's not just an abstract argument. It's because it means more money in people's pockets, but also it means that government is able to spend more on government services. Because the reason why parents are having to supplement often some of the things that the government is unable to do is because we fall short. And so when these two things work together and the economy grows and parents are able to afford a little bit more, it means that government is able to stretch itself a little bit further. So I really don't scoff at the complaints that parents are saying. And I think that it's a reality. A lot of parents, in fact, for me, I think the parents should be able to send their children to school, especially in no-fee paying schools, without having to worry about contributing anything. Because there's a reason why there are no-fee paying schools. It's to be able to meet people where they are, and it's to be able to give children an opportunity to have a quality education, regardless of whether they come from a poor background. So we will make sure that we fight harder for funding in the education sector ahead of the budget speech.
And when it comes to the implementation of the BELA Act in its totality now, there was, of course, that process that you still needed to embark on, and then the parties that were also saying that they're threatening legal action. What's the latest there?
So we are, obviously, as the president has commenced with the act, we are now proceeding full steam. And of course, Bongiwa, what we really want to do is we want to make sure that we draft the regulations as quickly as possible so that they can go out for public comment. The reason why regulations are important very quickly is because they give legal clarity to not only just schools and school governing bodies, but to parents and interested parties. But also, while we are waiting for regulations, and this is what I was saying to the trade unions and the SGB bodies today, is that we are in the process of drafting guidelines that will be issued to schools. So when a school gets an application for grade R and they don't have grade R there, what should they do? When a school gets, there are particular sections of the Act that now require them to do certain things. How should they handle that? And we are issuing those guidelines as soon as possible so that the sector is ready. And also that schools and principals in particular don't feel lost and feel as though there's a vacuum of information where they don't know how to give effect to the Act in its entirety.
All right, Minister, thank you so much for your time this evening. That's the Basic Education Minister, Siviwe Gwarube.